Welcome to the Jewish Education Experience podcast with your hosts, Yasmina and Ari, who will be uncovering gems of wisdom with Jewish educators from around the world.
To our audience, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, and we appreciate you sharing our podcast with others also. Please consider supporting our podcast financially by contributing via Zelle, jewisheducationpodcast@gmail.com, or by joining our Patreon community, www.patreon.com/Jewish Education Experience Podcast. And to all of you Jewish educators and students of Jewish education around the world, chizchu ve'imtzu. May you be strengthened and encouraged in your holy endeavors. Please remember to hit that subscribe button so that you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast may not necessarily be those of the hosts. Our guest today is Hilary Greenberg. Hilary Greenberg is an experienced educator, education director, and consultant. She has a master's degree in Jewish education from Gratz College and a doctorate in education from the University of Pennsylvania. Prior to becoming a Jewish educator, Hilary received her law degree from UCLA School of Law, and currently she is the co-founder and co-owner of Move Better, which is a fitness training and lifestyle coaching company. Wow. Hello, Hilary. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Yeah, lots of accomplishments there. Will you please, Hilary, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you actually began your journey in education?
Sure. I kind of fell into education, or I should say fell into Jewish education, because I had been always been sort of teaching and coaching in terms of, tutoring and coaching skiing and coaching swimming and things like that. And then I had started teaching some adjunct law classes at some local universities and found that I had a really good time doing it and seemed to be doing it very successfully, but I wanted to know a little bit more sort of the technical ends or the methodology ends. So I took a couple courses at Gratz College, because when I had once upon a time lived in Philadelphia and was working as an attorney, I did a Hebrew Ulpan there. And one of my professors, as I was taking these couple of courses, really started pushing me to go into Jewish education. And I was really enjoying the classes I was taking. You look at things very differently when you go studying, Judaism and as an adult. And so I sort of ended up with a master's in Jewish education and was asked to become the director at one of our local synagogues, and it kind of took off from there.
Are you originally from the Philadelphia area?
No, I grew up in New Jersey.
Okay.
Then we moved to Pennsylvania, up here outside the Poconos.
Okay.
Went to Philadelphia for college and then kind of came back there.
Cool. Are there any educators in particular that you admire?
It's funny. I admire a bunch. One person, the professor that I was mentioning who got me into Jewish education, Saul Wax, is somebody I really, really admire for not only how he guided me and mentored me through the whole process of sort of career switching into Jewish education and what areas that I wanted to go more in depth in terms of that type of study. I think the educators that I admire most are the students and teachers that I work with. You learn so much from the kids, and the teachers that I've been working with They're so dedicated and so committed to Jewish education that it just makes it a pleasure. And some of them are very experienced educators and show their passion for Judaism that way, even if they haven't come from a huge content background. And then there's the opposite as well, where they have a huge content background, but not as much teaching, but they share so much.
It's true. And it makes a difference for the kids too.
Yes, very much.
So what do you think it was that made your professor suggest Jewish education for you?
We had to, in the initial class that I took with him, we had to develop some kind of class or seminar. We kind of given free rein to do it. And I had a friend who was actually adopting a child at the time. So I decided that I wanted to learn more about how Judaism approaches that. And I did it as a small kind of seminar thing. And when I was time-wise supposed to be concluding, my classmates wanted to keep going, and the professor encouraged me to keep it going. And then afterwards, he and I had a sort of a lengthy discussion, and he was insisting that this was an area that I should be pursuing. And I kept insisting, no, I'm a corporate attorney. This is sort of an interest and a passion, but not, a field that I'm going to be working in. And he sort of kept pushing. And
Wow.
I ultimately realized that I really was enjoying it so much that I would make a switch.
Wow. Yeah, maybe he saw something you didn't see at the time.
For sure. What was the synagogue you said in Philadelphia where you were the education director?
I was the director of a synagogue out on the main line called Or Shalom.
Okay.
It was my second position as an education director, a jump up in the size of the congregation and the school from the initial one. And it was fantastic. Working with the rabbi, we had a very collegial relationship, and it made it so much easier to guide a school and build a program when you have that support from the rabbi and from your education committee, and your teachers buy into the direction and that you want to take things, obviously in consultation with all of the stakeholders.
Right.
But I think it's fun to build a program.
Wow. So Hilary, as a Jewish educator, how do you talk about God, and how might this differ with the various age groups that you teach?
How do I talk about God? I find that with younger kids, particularly, let's say like third, fourth, fifth grade age, one of the things that you notice is they start having questions, a lot more questions that they're willing to ask. So I really take their lead and talk about what is of interest, particularly sparking them to question.
Mm-hmm.
It's also interesting that at that age, they still, I guess you want to call it, see God or envision God as, the man in the long white beard sitting on a chair up in a heavenly place. And having to remind them that God has many faces and is not necessarily a he. Like, we can't define God as one gender, I guess, or another, because God has so many different aspects.
Do you think that vision is kind of like influenced by the family that they grow up with, or is that kind of like a standard way that young children see God?
I don't think it's so much a family influence. I mean, I think some parents talk with their kids about God, especially if their kids are questioning, because they hear about God in, religious school or just have those conversations because they've gone to synagogue with their parents or whatever it may be. But I don't think their picture of God necessarily comes from there. I think there's also, kids' storybooks, and when they,
Right.
The storybooks portray either the big cloud or
Right.
that, that older gentleman kind of a figure. I think more recent books do a much better job of it, but I also haven't been following that all that much.
I like God's paintbrush. I think that's a good one for kids,
Yeah.
talking about the different aspects.
I like the one about how God's invisible.
The Invisible Book.
I don't know that I know that one. I do know God's paintbrush, and I do like that story and illustrations.
Yes, definitely beautiful illustrations in that one.
Yeah. So the word education, or chinuch in Hebrew, it can be an amorphous term. How do you define education?
I think I define education as experience. It's a give and take between a student and a teacher. I think there's a content focus to education, obviously, and that knowledge from one generation to the next, it gets transmitted, but it's not like a black box kind of transmission where, teacher puts information into the box and student takes the information out from the other side of the box. I think it's a much more each building upon the other.
So kind of like an experience of the content and with the teacher as a guide.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. And I think that it's broader than that, because I think education is also questioning and developing sort of the key questions surrounding whatever subject you are presenting or engaging with. If you don't know, it's kind of like a map. If you don't know where you want to go, you're never going to get there.
Huh.
And I think in terms of education, there is got to be something guiding the educator to help make the teaching easier and yet help the kids make meaning of what they're learning. So it's sort of layered, like you have to know what the big ideas are that you want to accomplish and that you want them to take away for kind of the forever takeaways.
For sure. That makes sense.
And then you've got this is really important, but it may not be something you remember forever. And then there's those things that are just nice to know, or they're going to come up and we want to know them for now, but you're probably not going to, other than recognize them, by the time you get to, 3 years out or even the next summer. But it may spark something when you hear it again. So you just have to be thoughtful about it, I think.
So, and that's what you really enjoy, right? You said you enjoy making the content, like lesson plans and curriculums and things like that.
Not necessarily lesson plans, although they do build, obviously. I do a lot in terms of curriculum development, curriculum design. That's one of the areas that I went into in my doctoral program. I really found it really, it's like building a puzzle, but it's a puzzle that has to be meaningful.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard.
Definitely
I think.
I mean, how challenging was that this past year? I mean, with making sure that, I know everything was virtual. How were you able to make sure the kids were engaged and experiencing what they were learning while still, I guess, connecting with them online?
I think a lot of it had to do with the teaching team. I had some really good educators who were really committed. I think I said that earlier. And we would have discussions early in the year. We had some discussions. I presented to them what I thought were reasonable outcomes given the circumstances that we should be able to, guide the kids through. And they commented and reflected, and we sort of massaged things. And so everybody was on kind of the same page in terms of, okay, well, if they're learning this, then we're going to learn that. And how do we tie it together and make it make sense and be able to do it all on Zoom?
Definitely a challenge.
I mean,
Yeah.
just the tech part, I'm
Right.
not all that, or I should say I wasn't all that tech savvy. And yet learning how to, operate the Zoom and how to, there's lots of people were dealing with having to be online. So there were games developed and by some people, and some of the Jewish education publishing companies made it so that you had flip pages that you could use on your screen when you shared your screen.
Okay.
So a lot of resources developed over the course of the last summer as you were heading into the year and throughout the year.
Yeah, so I would think like Zoom could be really effective if it was one-on-one, or maybe just education in general. Like, would you agree? Like, I know it's not so practical, but if it could be like one-on-one teacher-student, would that be better, do you think?
I think it would be good. I don't know that it would be better. I think for some students, it's very helpful to get them caught up or to push them ahead. Probably for all students to check in, a teacher to be able to check in with individual students. We're fortunate at Gesher that our class sizes were not huge.
Right.
So the teachers were still able to give that attention to their students individually. And one of the really good things about it was that not only was the teacher working with the students, but they were really sharing with each other and supporting each other through the learning and through the tech glitches. When a kid would drop off because their internet connection got bad, somebody was always there to help and bring them back into the conversation. So I thought from being something that really nobody knew what was going to happen or how it would work, I think when you've got the whole team, and I'm talking teachers, students, parents, because especially with the younger kids, a lot of times their parents had to get them online and get them all set up. It can be really, really successful. And the other thing was, astoundingly enough, our attendance was almost 100% all the time.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Would you say this COVID was like the biggest challenge you had, or looking back at your whole education career, what was the biggest challenge that you faced?
I would say this was really challenging. I also had a big challenge the first time I went into a very, very large school. We had probably 400 or 500 kids.
Wow.
With, we had multiple campuses, even though it was an after-school supplementary program. So just kind of coordinating all of that and still making sure that you could build up a program that was, academically going to take them where you want to go, affectively going where you would hope it would go. That was a challenge for me, having come out of much smaller schools, to jump in and make sure that you could get everything working in the way that you had that very personal, close kind of community in a smaller school. This year was this year was definitely a challenge. Just
Right.
learning how to make it happen was a challenge.
Yeah, no, it sounds like there's just ups and downs all over the place. So how do you stay motivated?
I stay motivated because I think of first of all, just seeing the light bulbs come on when a student makes a new connection. When you see some of the kids going on and really getting active in a youth group, or coming back into the synagogue as madrichim and helping with the younger students, just seeing that there is this connection to Judaism and Jewish community and kind of history and heritage and the whole ball. And
Quite the heritage.
So what advice would you give to new educators who are just beginning their journeys in the field?
Be patient.
Yep.
You have to be patient with your students. You have to be really patient with yourself.
Easier said than done, though, right?
It is. And also look for a mentor or somebody that can guide you through some of the initial, especially the initial, like, oh my God, I'm in a classroom. What do I do?
That's an adjustment for a lot of new teachers, for sure.
It is, especially when a lot of times you'll have high school students or college students coming in to either be assistants or to be full-fledged teachers. And while they may have had a lot of experience with kids as camp counselors or in sports things or from doing some tutoring, things like that, they haven't necessarily tackled, 25 or 20 kids in a classroom.
Right. Which is crazy that there are that many kids in a classroom, but wow. How do you think we can help our students to build a proper Torah foundation?
Well, I think the first question is, what is a proper Torah foundation? That's a question that's going to be answered differently by different communities.
Right.
And even within the same community by different, synagogues, people, congregants at different synagogues. I think that's a kind of a tough question.
Yeah.
Would you say it's important for children to have a firm grasp of, let's say, Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses, or the writings or the prophets, that sort of thing? Do you think it's important for kids to know that?
I think it's important for kids to be familiar with it and hopefully through the years know it. I think that in a supplementary school situation or a complementary school situation, however you want to define synagogue education, it's really hard to get everything in that you would love to have the kids learn about. And
It's true.
So I think that there's some breadth of study of those things. You'll have a class, different points in time, you'll talk about sacred texts, you'll talk about, I think Parsha is very, the Parsha of the week can easily be built in and can be more more in depth each time they we cycle through the Torah over the grades. But in terms of a lot of the other things, I think it's more a question in the synagogue school situation or community after school situation to see that the kids have heard of these things, maybe have exposure to some of it. Midrash is a good place to start. Identifying other sacred texts is a good place to fill in. But I don't think they're going to get the depth of it. I think they may be intrigued by something and hopefully pursue it later on. But at this stage, I'm just not sure.
Right.
Yeah, I understand that. It's definitely challenging with the time frame.
I mean, do you think the supplemental kind of model that we have now, I mean, is that enough? I know like one of the big issues is, sometimes the kids just don't want to be there, but, their parents want them to be there. But, it's just they're so limited on the time that they're there.
There's a lot of different models of part-time Jewish education that have been or are being experimented with in different synagogues or community kind of programs. Like Gesher is a combination of a couple of synagogues.
Right.
I've worked in another situation where, and these are both conservative synagogues, but I've worked in a situation where we blended a reform in a conservative synagogue. I was in a situation to help develop a community-wide Hebrew high school where I think it was 7 synagogues came together.
Wow. Was this in Philadelphia?
No, that was in Detroit, outside of Detroit.
Okay.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and yet with the high school kids, you basically had one night a week. With your pre-B'nai Mitzvah kids, you generally have 2 days a week. Some places are down to where they have 1 day a week.
Wow. Right.
So your time is limited, but the ways that using that time, I think that there's a lot that you can do in that time in terms of helping the kids really appreciate Judaism and want to find their path and their place in Judaism, or at least get started on it.
Sure.
Well, don't worry. We'll cut out the blank, so it'll be totally streamlined when we finish.
What does successful Jewish education in the future look like?
Yeah, just to add on to that final question, because you mentioned kind of the communities. It's different in every community, and then even within the community, you have different. So, do you think that's just how it has to be, or can we kind of develop a more universal Jewish education system that just works better for everyone?
I don't think you're going to develop a one-size-fits-all program of Jewish education. And I don't think it's probably not realistic to try, except, maybe in day schools, if they all have similar standards. But in terms of part-time Jewish education, communities everywhere are different. What the parents want for their children are very different. What the clergy think is important for their congregants and their congregants' children to know can be very different. So I think it's more of a learning within the parameters of the particular organization or school.
Okay.
Well, I guess just as a quick bonus question, how important do you think Israel education is in that model?
Very.
Okay.
I think that Israel education, because Israel, at least the land of Israel, has been central to the Jewish people for thousands of years. I think that it's important to maintain that understanding and that connection. And similarly, there is now a state, a Jewish state. It's the only Jewish state. And I think that is important. We don't necessarily, and people are not going to agree on, all of the policies of the state or all of, the policies, the politics of the state. But I do think that understanding and appreciating that modern state is also important.
Well, we definitely agree with that. We need the support for Israel for sure, especially with the various things that have been going on. Well, Hilary, we are so grateful that you took the time to join us this evening on our podcast. And I know you're busy with your business and everything, and we just are very grateful that you joined us, and we really appreciate it.
I appreciate your having me and of having had the discussion with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wishing you all the best.
Same to you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.